Hello, I'm Robert Grusho, the president of the Deschler Group. I'm especially proud to be here at the Maker Faire at Greenfield Village because Deschler has been manufacturing parts for Ford and other companies since Henry Ford was producing B-24 bombers for World War II. Heritage is a wonderful thing, but progress is what it's all about. Deschler is comprised of 7 companies. The newest, Amanda Products, has taken us places we never expected to go. Inspired by Ultra-4 off-road racing, we now design and manufacture products for the off-road community. Lisa Lunsford, CEO of our GS3, another Deschler company, has shared my enthusiasm from the start.
Hello, my name is Lisa Lunsford, and GS3 is the collaborator for the Deschler Group companies. And it's been an honor to work with Robert so closely on so many projects for the Deschler Group companies. Their continued growth is proof that manufacturing is on its way back. But how does a company grow? It grows from the passion, the skill, the creativity of its people, the makers, which is why you're here today. And we believe that one way that we can inspire new makers is by sharing our most dramatic example of that, which is if you've been by our booth, you've seen our Jeep off-road vehicle that has these massive doors, the massive bumpers, the speed hook, and also the lights. In October of 2013, we announced that our new company would be taking the Deschler Group off-road. We explained that we had a list of products based on what we already produce for the likes of Ford, GM, and Chrysler that we can improve upon and manufacture right here in the USA. In fact, our first product, which is known as the speed hook, which we've also modified once again for the Jeep, was our first product, and it was ready to go and ready to be introduced, and we were anxious to tell the world.
Thanks, guys. Hey, makers, I'm glad you guys are here. My name is Matt Penkovsky. I'm with M3D, and I work closely with Amanda Products and all the Deschler companies. And we thought it would be more interesting to kind of tell you a story about something that we did with that Jeep rather than just show you a picture of it or just have people talk about it with any kind of background, because it actually is a pretty interesting story. It is a tier 1 supplier and doing interesting things for all these automotive companies, but it was actually a very small team of people that did this work. So I think it would be fun to kind of walk through it real quick. And then we'll get comments from our panelists. So back in November 2013, as Lisa said, we had the speed hook. We took it to SEMA. Has anyone been to SEMA before or know what it is? 1 person, 2 people, 3? So if you haven't been there, this is kind of what it's like. It's essentially crazy town with tens of thousands of car nuts for off-road, for performance, for any kind of automotive trick you can do to your vehicle. They're going to this show to show their new products. It's really inspiring, and it's a cool thing to go see. And we were there with our product, and here's kind of what it looks like on the inside. You literally, it's almost like the Smithsonian. You can't do it in one day. You're going to be there for a couple days looking at everything. So we were there with our speed hook, and basically, if you ever got your vehicle stuck, you put it in the receiver mount, you take your tow strap and loop it over that loop in the middle, and then you just pull on it. You don't have to tie a knot. You don't have to then destroy your tow strap, anything like that. It's very clean and safe and durable because we already make high-quality parts for Ford. So we had this product, and we took it around the country to Ultra-4 races and to dirt riot races and to Jeep-oriented events and showed it to people, and people loved it. And then they started telling us ideas everywhere we went. And they said, it's super cool, but I want to put it on my front of my vehicle in a bumper. That would be awesome. And I would take my stock bumper in my Jeep, throw it out, sell it on eBay or Craigslist, and put your bumper on with that thing in it. So with that in mind, we came back and thought about it and said, let's do it. Let's see what we can come up with. And that was in May 2014. So I want to kind of shift gears just a little bit to the panelists so you get to know who they are. And some of these guys had direct involvement in this project, and I think we'll start with Justin Warlock. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
So my name is Justin Warlock. I have a background in fabrication and production manufacturing as a welder, and then also working on custom, being a machinist, another custom fabrication for different vehicles and products. But then ultimately, I received a degree in industrial design from right here in Detroit, which was an awesome blessing. And from that, got into the design field. And one of the biggest things that has been a great plus for me is having that background into manufacturing and knowing exactly how things are put together, how pieces are manufactured on a larger scale, but then teaming that with the creative aspects that I learned through a design education to create some really neat products that are marketable, that everybody likes, but then also feasible that can definitely be made as well. So, yeah.
Thanks, Justin. And you're also one of the lead designers on this project. And then I want to have Nick Steffi introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Steffi. On this one, I was a prototype fabricator on this. My background is more of a hands-on experience. I was always a kid tearing toys apart, putting them back together, making little Frankenstein toys out of them. Not much different than stuff we see rolling out in the parking lot today. With that experience, started a normal working career, but decided to go into college to get further education. Went on for a mechanical engineering degree, and I got to take that education and that experience to put it into funner projects and bigger projects like the Jeep we built for this.
Thanks, Nick. And we also have Chuck Zender with us today.
Hi, I'm Chuck Zender. I'm the assistant plant manager at Amanda Manufacturing. I've got a background in welding, CNC fabrication, metalworking. Down at Amanda, we're the people that build the things these guys think of and invent, and put it all together. Sometimes weld it or whatever we have to get it back to these guys.
All right, so I thought it might be useful to think about the products that we made in these kind of three categories. So we're going to try to walk through them and kind of explain, like, we're actually not very different from what's happening at Maker Faire. It's just a different kind of space. So in terms of creativity and technology and fabrication, we thought there were some interesting things we wanted to share. So we've got, in creativity, we actually held in that May of 2014, we held a big kind of ideation session in Livonia for 2 days. Pretty much everybody on this panel, plus a couple more people who are not here today, participated in that. So really what you had was kind of an interesting mix of guys that can weld and fabricate and know how to set up all sorts of machinery back at the plant. You had the designers who could really sit there and talk the talk about how things could be made and bring up the ideas. And it was a really interesting mix where we literally, you can see the shots from this experience, competitive bumpers up on the wall, and we broke into two groups and people just kind of beat them up and talked about them and said what they liked and what they didn't like and tried to find the innovation and the interesting ways to make them better and different. And really all it started with was a bunch of sticky notes on the wall, and then graduated into things like this where we printed out some 3D model that we found online. We don't have the official Jeep 3D model of the Wrangler, and we never had it throughout the whole process, but that didn't matter. It didn't stop us. And then everyone could draw, so we all brought in paper and everyone was drawing all different kinds of ideas about bumpers and doors and mirrors and anything you can think of. We talked about other product categories too. And then we moved into kind of more refined drawings, and this is where it moved into the designers and tried to take what we pulled out of everyone's heads for about 2 days straight and then refine them down to something that seemed kind of real. And this is a shot from actually Justin's desk at home working on this during the project. So again, there's no fancy futuristic cube land that people are working in. It's accessible and it's real, And ultimately, once we came down to some direction about what we liked, it went into the computer and we tried to, render it out in a more realistic way. So, I think there's some cool things that happen here where, we're really trying to come up with interesting ideas, but we're doing it very much like a lot of people here could do today. And I want to ask a question to the panel, and unfortunately my question disappeared. Here it is. So really, I want to have the panel kind of talk about for a minute, what it was like collaborating over those 2 days when you're kind of coming from different worlds. In some cases, you hadn't even worked together before. But we had to come out of there with some interesting ideas and some interesting, options that we could pull down. So maybe, Justin, you can start.
Yeah, one of the funnest things about collaborating to do this, in me coming from the design perspective, is we'd sit there and come up with different ideas that maybe, oh man, this is going to look fantastic. Everybody's going to love the absolute look of this, but yet it didn't function right. And it's like, well, what's the point of having something that looks great but doesn't function worth a darn? So then maybe we might come up with an idea that this adds a ton of function to the whole thing, but aesthetically it doesn't look nice. And so that's where a lot of the designer comes into play, is trying to balance those two different ideas, that we can make something look really nice, but at the same time functions very well. And then as you see from some of the sketches, then our job is to take everybody's ideas and be able to put those down on paper and be able to visualize that so that we got something to work from. And then that way we can got something that we can say, oh, okay, I see what that looks like now. All right, let's refine that a little bit more. Let's talk to some of the engineers and the fabricators. Is that something that we can make?
Right, and going on with that meeting is nothing is a bad idea. We went in there totally open-minded. Everyone put your ideas on paper, show it right there. We weren't even worried is it practical? Is it be able to make it? We didn't care at that time. Everybody just went crazy with the ideas. There is no bad idea. And that's the thing we're here for with the skill sets. To begin with, there's never a bad idea. You have to be open-minded. We have to really put some ideas out there. We'll rein them back in later, but when you begin a project, never be scared to give out an idea.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting about, we only had about 6 months to do this. So from May to November, we had to try to come up with something and pull it together in a time frame. So I think we also talked about this idea of kind of design for manufacturing. And things can be crazy ideas, but at the same time, it wasn't really a no when we would talk about it, but we would talk about it from, I think, a little bit of like a feasibility perspective, right?
Yeah, and some of the ideas we might say, okay, like these guys are talking about, that no idea was a bad idea, and let's really stretch something, let's really get some creative ideas out there. And maybe we came up with some creative idea and we're like, well, that's probably not going to make it to the end, but maybe there's a piece of that. Maybe it's not the whole thing, but maybe there's a piece of that we can kind of pull from. So that's the whole, the greatest value in that exploration stage, is that you might not always come to that final design right there, but maybe there's something there that stems another idea in order to get where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Chuck, do you have anything you can say to us about kind of how Amanda Manufacturing kind of collaborates with customers, or how you interact with them?
Yeah, down at Amanda, when we get customers who need special projects done, or the things like these guys do, most of the time we get prints and pretty detailed drawings and stuff, and sometimes we don't. And the guys we've got working for us down there are pretty creative on. We need to know from our customers what the end result is required out of the product. And the guys we have are really good about understanding what they need and how to design parts and manufacture them to fit their needs and to do it cost effective for the customers. That's what we like doing, is seeing what we can do for them so everybody gets the best out of the deal.
Yeah, so not everything's perfect when it shows up to the door.
No, it's not perfect. There's a lot of trials and tribulations going through on these kind of programs. You'll think you've got it, and then you'll find out it's bending. We're going to have to heat treat it, but we have to heat treat it before we weld it. So that throws in a whole different line of problems that you got to deal with. And we can handle most of them, get through it pretty good, and get a good product out to people that need it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, you have a question?
Yeah, what the bumper replacement, what became of that? Do you have any pictures? Or?
We do. We'll share those in just a, yeah, good question. So we want to, because in the interest of time, we'll jump to the next section, and we're thinking about technology. And not everybody on this project sat in the same building. Not everybody on the project had worked together before, like I said. And in a lot of ways, we were all over the country. We had fabrication happening in 2 parts of Ohio. We had 3D printing happening here in Michigan. I think it was Southfield, somewhere near there. We had Robert and Lisa and some other folks providing leadership here in Livonia. And then we had a whole West Coast group, myself at the time when I was living there, product engineering, some creative, and 3D modeling. We ended up having a really diverse, interesting set of people. And probably one of the most interesting twists of the whole thing is that our 3D modeler actually did the parts of the intro for the Game of Thrones TV show. He's not a bumper guy. He's not a door guy. He doesn't do cars. He does bizarre landscapes and other interesting things, fantasy stuff. But because this was so different and just unknown, we thought he was the right kind of guy who could interpret what Justin had, essentially kind of pulled down into a really good rendering into something that we could manipulate. So, this is just a quick screenshot of us literally making modifications to the 3D models over something called GoToMeeting. So we're all on our computers in all these different states, and he's literally editing the product and making changes while we're all talking to him at the same time. So it's a very interesting way to go about it. And then you end up with things that kind of look like this, where you have the light that's on the left, and then these kind of 2 pieces of the bumper that are end caps that have the tow hooks in green. You can see them kind of wireframe in there. Another aspect of the technology we used was 3D printing, like I mentioned. Some pieces like this element on the bottom right, this is all just a sequence of images, are too big and complicated to do quickly, I think, with metal, and that's why we went the 3D route. And Nick worked closely with those folks to make sure it came out the way we needed. And I want to kind of move on to a question about all that stuff, the idea of us working together with different technologies. How do you we use technology in a way that might be a little different, maybe not, but how do you think technology is really changing kind of the manufacturing process? This is a short, small program, but for bigger things, are there similarities between this to what you do daily with customers?
Part of this project that we did that's different than normal is normally we'd have a 3D environment with every aspect, like we talked about, for example, front bumper. You would have the 3D frame horns, you would have all the safety stuff, you would have all the components of the vehicle on the computer screen. And in this case, we didn't do that. We actually did it kind of old with a new way. We got a concept, and then we actually tore the vehicle apart to get the limitations or all of our measurements. We'll see in the pictures coming up, we did some foam modeling to make sure everything fit, some previews looks, and then we took the old way, and we blended it into the new way, like with the 3D printing and 3D modeling. And just the thing that we skipped, the area we skipped was we didn't do everything through a computer. We didn't have the 3D data. We didn't have the 3D background. We didn't have all that stuff. We did it the old way to integrate it with the new way. So that was like the fun part, I guess, something different than what we normally do. Normally we have a whole 3D environment. And this way we took it back a level and then actually went a step forward in the new level on how we manufacture the prototype parts. And now we're showing here, that was the part that was really good about this project and how we did it.
So let's jump to the next section here for fabrication, which is really kind of the guts of making things. So like Nick was saying, literally foam blocks. You can see blue tape on the Jeep. That's not there to protect the paint, really. It's also set up to actually do measurements. So we were writing with markers on the Jeep. And then those measurements would get sent back to the 3D modeler, and the 3D modeler would make changes, and then we would send it back to Nick, and he would look at it, and he'd make some more adjustments. It was a very, like Nick was saying, kind of old school meets new school process. That's the entire rear bumper there, kind of half done. Close-up of what we were calling the teeth on the front bumper. Again, not super high-tech solutions, but they worked. I mean, that totally worked for what we needed to do. And I think even in this example of the tow hook, did we make modifications to the hook as far as sizes? Okay, so we did even have to go back to Amanda Manufacturing and have them make some changes. More examples of measurements. You can see a printout of the 3D model there in the lower left corner, just stuck to the vehicle, so we can kind of keep our eye on the ball. Nick, how big was the team in Ohio actually fabricating this?
The whole team in Ohio.
You can use the other mic too if it's not working.
Yeah, the team in Ohio, on the fabrication, we had a total of 6 people involved, and that was included a body guy who's also the paint specialist, 2 different welders, and 2 fabricators, and myself. And the fabricators, we had some special bins on this. We had this stuff. We came to a point, even at SEMA, it was kind of funny. The parts that were made out of steel, people thought they were plastic because they were too perfect. They're like, "Oh, why'd you make it out of plastic?" I said, "That's not out of plastic. That's out of steel." And they're like, "No." I said, "Go touch it, hit it, feel it. This is steel." So the guys did a really good job, but everyone had their specialty, and then we kind of cross-trained and did other things that we weren't the best at. But the only way to learn these kind of skill sets is to do it. And that's why you have somebody with you that knows what they're doing, and then you stand beside them, listen to them, and work with them to learn some of the tricks to be able to do what they can do good. Matt's on the pictures you can see.
Oh, wait, you want to go back?
Yeah, like this picture, the front teeth, and you can see in the Jeep now where it's at. But we can see the corners, how these are, the bends. That's all welded stuff and ground, welded and ground, everything fit afterwards. You can go see the final product. But this is where we didn't have the 3D data or the environment, so we're building these end caps like out of foam, and like Matt said, we would get on iMeetings sometimes 3 times a day with updates on dimensionals and pictures and just sharing information. And a lot of it was learning to communicate with other people that are not at your level at this part of the project, but are at an above level in another part of the project. So it was really fun to see, a guy that can do the 3D modeling on a computer. He's making live adjustments to the dimensions, the 22 dimensions I just read off to him. And then I go over here and we can adjust the block and see what the deformation or the difference is. But this is a good example. We've changed this foam block, I think, about 6 times. I think it's the time we got done with the final place of where we wanted to be. That was really good. But we had a guy that come in that was good at shaping the foam and sanding the foam. We did all different projects with that. And then, what else to say about that?
No, that's perfect. I mean, I think this is really the big thing to kind of dig into is that, you 3 guys have skills and talents that you have to learn somewhere. Someone's got to show you this, or maybe you try it yourself. But at a certain point, you have an interest in making things with your hands and making things, ultimately for things like this. You probably do stuff on your own time in the beginning. Can you guys talk a little bit about kind of what got you interested in learning about those ideas of like, I want to learn how to weld, I want to learn how to, do things with foam or whatnot?
I guess I'll start. I think the way I got started welding is I believe I broke something at Grandpa's on some of his farm machinery when I was probably 10 years old, and I needed to figure out how to weld that and fix it before he found it. And I think I did a pretty good job because I don't think I ever got caught. But ever since I was young, I was always monkeying around with welders and burning myself with torches. And it took a while until I got somebody to show me how to use these pieces of equipment. But once I did, I got pretty proficient at it, and just lucky enough I can still pursue that kind of thing now and make neat stuff like parts for this Jeep. It's pretty interesting.
So for myself, I kind of come from the same world as these guys of being more hands-on and always, younger, taking things apart. Didn't always get able to put them back together, but I really loved the fabrication of everything. But just wanted to go just a step before that and do more of the design work for it. So obviously going in and learning how to draw, learning how to illustrate everything was a huge passion. I just loved the customized world. Got into the design world, particularly in the very beginning because of the hot rod industry. I wanted to get into old hot rods and everything, and that kind of eventually just led me into the product design world in general because I just loved creating anything. Didn't have to be specifically for hot rods or cars, but just loved the product design world in general.
My beginnings on it is about the same as Chuck's, is getting a little bit of trouble, figuring out how to fix it on our own. And also it's just the hands-on part. It's something, people have different goals or different things that keep you driven. My thing is sometimes if we have a stressful day at work, we have 42 meetings in a day and it doesn't seem like we got anything accomplished, you go out in the garage and you take a piece of steel and you make something. You accomplish something. And it maybe just even because of the short-term part of it, where it doesn't take months or years to see it come to fruition, you can walk out there and just, I'm going to make a windmill today. You grab some steel, we cut it, weld it together, and you made something with yourself. I think it depends on the different type of people. But that helps me, get through some stressful times, is to go out and actually make something with your hand. It may not be the prettiest in the world, but you did it yourself, and it functions, it works. So that was my reason why I really got into it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, what happens when, let's say, you start working in manufacturing? Let's say you grew up learning how to weld yourself, or you maybe went to like a trade school or something like that, and you go there. Do you learn more when you're there?
That is a whole part of all of our employees. I think it's been a family-owned company forever, and part of the thing is, if you start out here, there's nothing wrong with starting here and working our way up. And I think that's what's different about a manufacturing is. You can start at the bottom, or not say at the bottom, but not at the highest level or where you want to be right away, but you have the chance to move up. You have the chance to learn new skills. There's not just, okay, here's where you're going to be. Oh, you don't have 16 years of college degrees, you're not going anywhere. That's not how we operate. It's like, okay, we want to bring the people we have up. This person works hard, this person tries hard. They may have no clue what a welder is, and they walk in the door at all. But everything I put in front of this person, they excel at, they learn at. They go home on their own time, they research it, they come back and say, I know how to do that. How'd you learn that? I looked at home. You have a person that cares on the inside, and a person that has a drive and the willing not to be scared to fail at a little project, to learn how to do it for a bigger project. And I think there we have that chance of advancement, and it helps out a lot working for the company itself.
Okay, thanks, Nick. All right, you guys want to see what this thing looks like if you haven't seen it already outside? All right, so that's what it looks like. So you got the 3D printed ends on the outside of the bumper there that house the green tow hooks. All steel middle section with a winch baked into it. Off-road lights on the outside. You can detach the wings if you want to. It's just 3 bolts. You take it off, you're good to go. And the hooks fold forward. So if you want to use them, you can get them pointing straight ahead. Put the strap on. They're the massive doors that we put up there. You have to see them in person to believe them. And really, that's what we're hoping, is that you guys want to stop by after this. You can ask us more questions. You can see this thing in person. Here's a close-up of this one light that was 3D printed, where we've got the mirror of the light and then a GoPro clip kind of built into the mirror on the top. And then, it's not all just work. You get to go to SEMA at the end of the year. You get to show people what you did. Nick got interviewed for some TV crew that came by. And when nobody was looking, he even stood on the doors to show you that they're all steel. So thanks for listening, and we really appreciate it. We're right next to the go-kart track if you haven't seen it out back. And thanks a lot. Do you have a question? What's that? So those were prototypes from November, and we're working through some production right now. They're not out yet. Nick, do you want to answer that?
All right, whenever we do something like this, like I said, this is not intended directly for a tier 1 thing. This is for the aftermarket. But what we use on these, we took all the stock parts, and we know what the weight of the stock parts are. So that's always our target. Like, we look at these doors you see look really heavy, right? When you see them, they're going to be huge. They're actually 6 pounds lighter than a factory electric door. So we use our design limitations on that as we took what the factory was and encapsulated that. It's okay, here's our limits. We can't go past this weight. We can't go past this size. We didn't do any aerodynamic testing because usually, like on these bumpers, Jeep's not considered a high-speed vehicle. It's 75 mile an hour. So we did not do that. But as far as the weight goes and suspension and handling, that's how we dealt with that.
You have a question back there?
Yeah, a question and more of a comment than anything. I spent about 12 years at Ford Motor Company hanging bumpers and building bumpers for the Lincoln Town Car. And we're talking heavy steel, heavy chrome, and it was a pretty tough job. The area was called a graveyard where we did work because nobody wanted to work there. But they changed from a high impact density foam on the inside of the bumper, what's the term, the piece that fit on it had a particular name, I can't think of it. And then they went to the fascia, and of course they have all the crash cams inside, all the technology was there to make sure that, the car was still safe. But it surely took a lot of hard work off the backs of the people building the cars than what it was prior to with the heavy steel. Everything was steel and heavy, and then they went to the insert, which was a foam with a little steel frame on it. I don't know what the weight differential was, but I tell you what, it sure made the work a lot easier, and it was actually not because it was so heavy, but because of the manufacturing process of installing it. So that was kind of like my question. You guys must work really closely with manufacturers as far as design and ease of operation at like the pilot plants or whatever, where we test out things. Is that kind of how it works for you?
Yeah, this product itself is for the aftermarket, but we are a tier 1. So obviously, we go through, this product is for aftermarket only.
Okay.
But our tier 1 side, we do all the pilot builds. We go through everything, same thing, we go through the plants, and just like you're speaking, is a lot of stuff people don't see in cars is how is this thing going to be built, which is what you're talking about. On some of our sensors we got on the Chrysler side for the diesels, we had a wiring harness that was loose, and then we used a different kind of tape to hold it. Well, the tape was too hard to actually break apart to unwind the wiring harness, so we went with another style of tape. And we went through 3 or 4 different variations of just a tape to hold a wiring on, because when the people were assembling the vehicles, they're there to do a job too, and we didn't want to make their job hard, and this tape was hard for them. So we changed the variations of tape like 4 times to get it to something that was easy for them to do. And
That's the crucial part of working with the people that are actually doing the installation, because it's time, it's all
Yep.
about how much time do they have to do a certain process. So, yeah, thank you, I appreciate it. It certainly made my life a lot easier with the work that you guys do, being on the cutting edge of, building and making.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was kind of the same thing. Even though that this was an aftermarket part, we also considered the person removing their OEM bumper and putting this one on. So that was one stipulation that we wanted to put was, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that this bumper, you didn't have to weld anything on. It was merely just unbolt the old one and bolt this one right in. So it made that process a lot easier for the customer actually installing it.
And Justin's 100% correct, and I didn't talk about that. But that was part of our design criteria was the average person needs to be able to assemble these pieces to their Jeep. We don't want them to have to go to a shop, lose use of their vehicle for a week, and have this and that done to put these parts on their vehicle. So the doors are a direct replacement for the factory doors. If you can take the factory door off, like most Jeep owners can, you can install these doors. Front bumper, it only requires a socket set to put this whole bumper on your Jeep. No torches, no grinders, no welding, no anything. Just with a socket set, and 1 Allen wrench, you can assemble this whole bumper to your Jeep. And that was part of the thing is we thought it would give like owners, usually like owners of this, you want a little bit of pride. You want to say that I put this on myself. Some people are really into that. That's how I am. That's the kind of person I am. I don't want to say, I left it at the shop. I'm going to go pick it up in 3 days. No, I put this bumper on my Jeep. And that's how this was designed also.
So on that picture right there, how much of that's available right now?
So right now they're not available. Those are.
When's the product release date?
I'll defer to the panel to answer that question.
Roughly.
We're hoping to have everything. Yeah, we want to be able to. Everything on this Jeep will be for sale before this year's over. Yes. The speed hooks are available now, not the ones you see in this picture, but the other speed hooks are available now. We are actually right now we're working on the 4-door doors for the 4-door Wranglers.
The only thing on your website right now is a speed.
It's just the speed hooks, correct? Because these have not been released for sale yet.
If you wanted to do the whole thing, what would the price be? 5,000, 10,000? I know you haven't got it all figured out, but roughly.
I would say you're actually right in the 5,000 range. You're better off than the 10, yes. And then each one is a component and buildable. Some of the engineering stuff we put into it, you can't see just by looking at it. What we have is the outside parts of the bumpers that we 3D printed. People are like, well, those are weak or 3D printed. Yeah, we did that for the prototype stage. But what we do is when you're off-roading, part of the idealization was referred to everybody else's bumpers. Everybody had either an off-road bumper that wasn't really street legal, or they had a full bumper that didn't work good off-road. So we said, okay, what are we going to do about this? And what our design was, we have a center section, and you see in the other pictures, it was all built from steel. Everything's tied in the frame horns. Everything is backed up. The speed hooks are tied into a whole field structure inside the bumper. The outside wings is what makes it, has a street legal because it covers the tire track. Well, with 3 bolts, that whole outside wing will come off. And now you have your off-road short bumper. So it will function for your street bumper, and with, they said 4 minutes to take the front end apart, you'll be ready to do your off-road bumper. That won't limit you. Because part of the thing with off-roading, you have to have the tire be able to get onto the tire, onto the obstacles. And with a full width bumper, that limits you. With this one, you have you can go there, drive to the trail and be safe, and then once you're at the trail, you can take it off, and it's functional for off-road also. So there's a little bit more like engineering and thought. We put a lot of thought process that's kind of got to be explained into it in the product. It's not obviously just sometimes it's not obvious looking at why it's there. Like with the addition of the GoPro camera mount and the mirror on the driver's side. And the next step we went on that was to have full power inside the door. So there was a USB charger built into the steel doors. So when your GoPro, if you use a GoPro, what happens is you always run out of battery. Well, why don't we have the USB ports built right in the steel frame to be able to power the camera and keep it charged as you're off-roading? Now you're not limited to the battery power. There was a lot of extra little things and thoughts that are into this that kind of have to be explained. But that's why we did it.
All right. Oh, you have another question? Okay. It's, well, a lot of Jeep owners don't go off-road, but they want to look like they do, right? But then for the people who really do want to go off-road, like Nick was saying, that whole center section with those vertical, what we call teeth, is steel. So you want something solid there in case you do go and you want protection. There's a winch that's baked into that bumper so that it's all protected. Most winch makers will tell you that the reason why the winches come back for service is not because the person broke it when they used it, it's because of the elements. It gets filled with sand and snow and it just gets wrecked from being exposed. Most people don't put the cover on them. So when they saw this at SEMA, they were like, thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a mix of people.
Since your audience is so small, are you going to expand to design this for other vehicles to try to make it easier to recoup investment?
You mean for the products for just a Jeep?
Yeah.
Well, the Wrangler series, like right now, which is WK, I'm sorry, the group's not real small. No. It's exploded the last 3 years. This vehicle is just, a lot of purchases have made, a lot of vehicles are sold. So, I mean, at first it seemed like it's a small group, but it's really not.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. If you want to come by our tent and check this out in person, feel free, and we'll be back there. You can ask us more questions.